The stone crumbled beneath Autumn's fingers as she pushed against the wall panel, revealing a crack that hadn't been there moments before. Dust cascaded down her shoulders, coating her already filthy uniform in another layer of grime. She'd been assigned to clean the abandoned west tower of the Nightfall Court. A punishment, really, for daring to meet the eyes of Lady Hazel during last night's blood ceremony. 3 weeks scrubbing forgotten corridors alone, far from the safety of his servant quarters, deep in the parts of the castle where even vampires rarely ventured. The crack widened. Something inside the wall shifted with a sound like grinding teeth, and suddenly the entire panel swung inward, revealing darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the light from her lantern. Autumn's heart hammered against her ribs. She shouldn't go inside. She absolutely should not go inside. But the air that rushed out carried something strange. Not the musty rot she expected, but something clean, almost metallic, like the moments before a lightning strike. She stepped through. The chamber beyond defied everything she knew about the castle's architecture. It was massive, far larger than should fit within the tower's walls, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows. Silver veins ran through the black stone, pulsing with a faint luminescence that made her lantern redundant. In the center stood a single pedestal, and atop it, a crystal vessel filled with liquid that glowed like captured moonlight, silver white, moving with its own gentle current, as if alive. Autumn approached slowly, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. The vessel was ancient, covered in symbols she didn't recognize, but it drew her forward with magnetic inevitability. Her throat burned with thirst. She hadn't been permitted water since dawn, another part of her punishment. The liquid looked so pure, so inviting. Surely just water blessed by some long-dead vampire priest. Just one sip to ease the burning in her throat, and no one would ever know. She lifted the vessel with trembling hands. It was lighter than it should be, as if the liquid inside had no weight at all. She brought it to her lips and drank. The taste was impossible to describe, like starlight made liquid, like the memory of thunder, like every moment of peace she'd never had crystallized on her tongue. It burned cold down her throat, spreading through her chest, her limbs, her fingertips. The vessel slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor, but Autumn barely heard it. The chamber was spinning, or maybe she was spinning, and the silver veins in the walls blazed bright as suns. Then the world tore apart. Reality fractured like glass, each piece reflecting a different version of the same moment. Autumn saw herself standing in the chamber, saw the castle above, saw the kingdom spreading beyond it, and then saw all of it fold inward, collapse into a single point of silver-white light that consumed everything she was, everything she knew, everything she would ever be. When her vision cleared, she was still standing in the chamber, but everything was wrong. The silver veins in the walls no longer pulsed with faint light. They blazed like captured stars. The air itself seemed different, heavier, charged with power that made her skin prickle. And her body, something fundamental had changed. She could hear her own heartbeat, thunderous and slow, pumping something that felt both familiar and utterly alien through her veins. When she looked down at her hands, they seemed to shimmer slightly in the silver light, and her reflection in a piece of the shattered crystal showed eyes that glowed with pale silver fire. "What have I done?" The words left her lips in a whisper, but they echoed through the chamber with unnatural resonance. Above, she heard footsteps, heavy boots on stone, voices raised in alarm. Someone had noticed the tower's disturbance. Autumn ran for the opening she'd entered through, but the passage had changed. It led upward now, toward what should have been solid stone, but instead opened into corridors she didn't recognize. She climbed, driven by pure instinct, and emerged into a hallway that looked like the Nightfall Court but subtly different. The tapestries were the same, but their colors were brighter. The sconces held actual flames, not the cold witchlight vampires preferred. A woman rounded the corner and gasped. She looked exactly like Lady Hazel. Same sharp features, same elegant bearing, but her eyes held no vampire crimson. They were human brown, and she carried a basket of bread, dressed in the simple clothes of a merchant. "Who are you? How did you get into the royal wing?" Royal wing? Autumn's mind reeled. This wasn't the Nightfall Court. Or rather, it was and it wasn't. Before she could answer, before she could process any of it, more footsteps approached, and then a voice cut through her confusion like a blade through silk. "Stand aside." The man who appeared was devastatingly familiar. He had Austin's face, Austin's commanding presence, but where the vampire lord of the Nightfall Court moved with predatory grace, this version carried himself with the bearing of someone who'd earned his authority through leadership, not supernatural power. He was human. Completely, utterly human. And when his eyes met hers, something in the universe clicked into place with an almost audible snap. He stared at her, and she watched recognition flash across his features. Not recognition of who she was, but of what she'd become. His hand went to the sword at his hip, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he studied her with an intensity that made her shiver. "You're not human. Not anymore." It wasn't a question. "I don't understand what's happening. I found a chamber, and there was this vessel, and I drank." "You drank from the origin." "Vessel." His face went pale. Behind him, the woman who looked like Hazel made a sound of pure terror and fled. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "It looked like water! I was thirsty! I didn't know!" "You've consumed the blood of the first, the source from which all vampire kind was meant to originate. In our world, that vessel has been sealed for 3,000 years, waiting for the one who would claim its power and birth a new age." He took a step closer, and she saw his jaw clench. "You've become something that shouldn't exist. The first vampire in a world that has no vampires." The words hit her like physical blows. A world with no vampires. She looked past him, really seeing the corridor for the first time. No vampires. The humans who passed by, and they were all human, she could hear their rapid heartbeats, smell their warm blood, looked at her with fear, but also with something else. Awe. Reverence. But in my world, the world I came from, there are vampires everywhere. They rule. I'm just a servant in the Nightfall Court. I'm nobody. You were nobody. Now you're the origin, the first. Austin's hand finally moved from his sword, but not in threat. He extended it toward her, palm up, in a gesture that felt ceremonial. "I am Austin Blackthorn, king of the Southern Realm. And unless I'm very mistaken, you've just fulfilled a prophecy that will change everything." Autumn's legs nearly gave out. King? The parallel was impossible and perfect. In her world, Austin Nightshade was the vampire king, the most powerful and feared lord in all the territories. Here, his human counterpart ruled with mortal authority. And she was no longer the powerless servant girl who couldn't even meet a vampire lady's eyes. "I need to go back. There has to be a way to reverse this. I don't want..." There is no going back. The origin. Blood doesn't undo itself. It transforms. It creates. He stepped closer still, and she realized she was taller now than she'd been, stronger, her senses so acute she could hear his heartbeat, count the breaths of every human in the castle. You drank from a vessel that exists in both realms simultaneously. You've become the bridge between them. And in this world, you've brought something we've only known in legends. A commotion erupted from the courtyard below. Shouts, screams, the clash of weapons. Austin's expression hardened and he strode to the window. Autumn followed on instinct and looked down to see chaos unfolding. Men in dark armor were attacking the castle gates, moving with coordinated precision, and at their head rode a woman who made Autumn's new vampire senses scream danger. She looked like the Hazel from Autumn's world, the cruel vampire lady who'd made her life miserable. But this version carried herself with military precision. She was human, but clearly deadly. Hazel Thornwood. She's been trying to overthrow my rule for years, claiming she has the right to lead through ancient bloodlines. He glanced at Autumn, and something calculated entered his expression. She's going to sense what you are, what you've become, and she'll either try to kill you or control you. I don't know how to fight. I don't know how to use whatever this is inside me. Then you'd better learn quickly, because in about 5 minutes, she's going to break through those gates. And when she does, she'll know exactly what happened in that chamber. The silver veins in the castle walls began to pulse in rhythm with Autumn's heartbeat, bright, insistent, spreading from where she stood like ripples in water. The castle itself was responding to her presence, recognizing her as something fundamental, something that had been missing. The castle knows me. This castle was built 3,000 years ago by the last humans who knew vampires would one day exist. They sealed the origin chamber and waited for the one who would claim it. They built this entire kingdom as a throne room for the first. He turned to face her fully. You're not just some random girl who drank from the wrong vessel. You're the culmination of a prophecy older than recorded history. And you're standing in what will become your kingdom. The gates below exploded inward. Hazel Thornwood rode through on a massive black horse, her sword drawn, her face twisted with triumph. She looked up at the window where Autumn stood, and even from this distance, Autumn saw her eyes widen with recognition and rage. She knows. Listen to me carefully. The origin blood gives you power over life and death, over transformation itself. But you have to claim it. You have to choose to be what you've become. I don't know how. Yes, you do. Deep down, you already know. The blood is whispering to you. Listen to it. He was right. Beneath her fear, beneath her confusion, something ancient and powerful was stirring. It whispered in a language she'd never learned but somehow understood. It showed her images of transformation, of creation, of power that could reshape reality itself. The origin blood didn't just make her a vampire. It made her the source from which all vampires would flow. Hazel burst into the corridor with a dozen of her soldiers behind her. She stopped when she saw Autumn, and something like hunger crossed her face. So the legend is true. The origin chamber was never sealed. It was waiting. And some cleaning girl stumbled into a power that should belong to those worthy of it. She leveled her sword at Autumn. I'll give you one chance. Serve me. Transform me first. Make me your second. And together, we'll rule this realm and the vampire world you came from. How do you know about the other realm? Because I've been studying the prophecies my entire life. I've spent decades searching for the origin chamber, and you, some worthless nobody, found it by accident. Her voice dripped with contempt. Now give me what should have been mine, or I'll take it by force. Austin moved to stand between them, his hand on his sword, but Autumn felt power surge through her veins. The silver light in the walls blazed brighter, responding to her will, and she understood something fundamental. In this realm, she wasn't the powerless servant. She was something these humans had been waiting for, hoping for, building toward for 3,000 years. No. The word resonated through the castle. The very stones seemed to vibrate with it. Hazel stumbled back a step, her eyes wide with shock. The soldiers behind her lowered their weapons involuntarily, responding to something primal, something that recognized her as beyond human authority. I didn't choose this power, but I won't give it to someone who sees it as a tool for domination. In my world, I've lived my entire life under the thumb of people like you. People who think cruelty is strength, who think fear equals respect. I won't create that here. Then you'll die here. Hazel lunged forward, but Austin was faster. He caught her sword with his own, the clash of steel ringing through the corridor. His soldiers poured in from the opposite end, and suddenly the hallway was chaos. Autumn pressed herself against the wall, overwhelmed by the violence, by the speed at which everything was happening. Then one of Hazel's men broke through Austin's guard and drove straight for Autumn, his blade aimed at her heart. Time seemed to slow. She saw the sword coming, saw the hatred in his eyes, and something inside her snapped into focus. The origin blood sang through her veins and she moved. Her hand shot out and caught the blade. It bit into her palm, drew blood. But the wound closed before the blood could fall. The soldier stared at her in horror as she twisted the sword from his grip and tossed it aside like it weighed nothing. Then, acting on instinct, she placed her palm against his chest and pushed. Power flowed out of her. The soldier gasped, his eyes going wide, and Autumn felt the transformation take hold. His heartbeat slowed, his body temperature dropped, his canines elongated into fangs. In seconds, he went from human to vampire. But not like the vampires from her original world. He was different, stronger, more aware, connected to her in a way she could feel like a thread between their souls. He dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to the floor. My origin, my creator, command me. The fighting stopped. Everyone in the corridor stared at what Autumn had just done. She'd transformed a human into a vampire, with nothing but a touch and her will. Austin's expression was unreadable, but Hazel looked like she might vomit with rage. The legends didn't exaggerate. You don't just have vampire powers, you can create them, shape them. I didn't mean to. I just wanted him to stop. But you did it. And now everyone here knows what you're capable of. He turned to face Hazel, his sword still raised. Leave now, or the next person she transforms will be you. And I doubt you'll enjoy serving the woman you just called worthless. Hazel's face contorted with fury, but fear was there too. She looked at her soldier kneeling at Autumn's feet, saw the absolute devotion in his eyes, and something in her calculation shifted. This isn't over. The origin blood may have chosen her, but that doesn't make her fit to rule. She doesn't know our world, our politics, our threats. She'll fail. And when she does, I'll be there to pick up the pieces. She turned and strode away, her remaining soldiers following. But Autumn caught the look. Hazel threw over her shoulder, a promise of future conflict, of schemes already forming. When they were gone, Austin finally sheathed his sword and approached Autumn carefully, as if she were a wild animal that might bolt. "Are you hurt?" "I turned him into a vampire. Just by touching him. What am I?" "You're the origin, the source, the first." He gestured to the soldier still kneeling. "Stand. Tell us your name." "Oliver, my king. But I am hers now. I feel her in my blood, in my bones. I would die for her, without question." "Can I undo it? Can I make him human again?" "I don't think so. The transformation looks permanent. But look at him. He's not suffering. He's not afraid. Whatever you made him, he's complete." Oliver nodded, his new vampire senses clearly overwhelming him, but his eyes held only gratitude when he looked at Autumn. "I feel more alive than I ever did as human. The world is clearer, sharper. And I know my purpose now, to serve you, to protect you, to help build whatever kingdom you will create." The days that followed were a blur of discovery and transformation. Austin kept Hazel and her forces at bay, while Autumn learned to control her abilities. The castle itself seemed to teach her, its ancient stones responding to her presence, showing her visions of what had been and what could be. She learned that this realm existed parallel to her own, connected by the origin chamber, a bridge between realities that had waited 3,000 years for someone to activate it. In her original world, vampires had emerged from a different source, had evolved differently, had built their society on hierarchy and blood dominance. Here, she could create something new, something better. But the connection between realms worked both ways. 3 nights after her transformation, as she stood in the origin chamber trying to understand the symbols on the walls, she felt a pull, like a hook in her chest, and suddenly she was standing in 2 places at once. The nightfall court overlaid itself on Austin's castle, and she saw through both sets of eyes. In the vampire realm, the origin chamber looked different, darker, colder, the vessel still intact. And standing before it was a man she recognized, Austin Nightshade, the vampire king from her original world. He was staring at the vessel with an expression of stunned disbelief. Someone drank from it. Someone activated the origin blood from the human realm. He looked up, and for a moment their eyes met across realities. The servant girl, Autumn. She's alive, and she's become something impossible. The vision faded, but Autumn's heart raced. Her transformation hadn't gone unnoticed in her original world. The vampire king knew what she'd done, knew what she'd become. And if his expression was any indication, he was coming to find her. She needed to be stronger. She needed to understand her powers, but more than that, she needed to decide what kind of ruler she would be when the 2 worlds inevitably collided. Austin, her Austin, the human king, found her in the chamber that night. He'd been visiting more frequently, drawn by curiosity at first, but Autumn sensed something deeper developing between them. The way he looked at her had changed from wary respect to something warmer, something that made her pulse quicken despite her transformed nature. "You look troubled." "The vampire king from my world knows about me. I saw him in a vision. He was standing in the origin chamber in the Nightfall Court, and he knew I'd activated the blood." So your original world and this realm are truly connected. The prophecies spoke of a bridge between possibilities, but I never imagined. He sat beside her on the chamber floor, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his human body. Are you afraid of him? I should be. In my world, he's the most powerful vampire in existence. Ruthless, strategic, unstoppable. But when our eyes met across realms, I didn't sense malice. I sensed recognition. Like he knew exactly what I'd become and what it meant. If he comes here, he'll have to go through me first. You're human. Even as king, you couldn't fight a vampire lord. Then you'll have to make me something more. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. The origin blood chose you for a reason. You've already transformed Oliver. He's faster, stronger, more capable than any human warrior. You could build an army. You could defend both realms. But transformation is permanent. I felt it when I changed Oliver. Once someone becomes a vampire through my blood, there's no going back. I can't do that to you without... Without what? My consent? Autumn, I'm giving it. I've been the human king of this realm for 10 years. I've fought wars, survived assassinations, held together a kingdom that should have fallen apart a dozen times over. But I've also been waiting for something. Someone. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the silver veins that now glowed faintly beneath her skin. The prophecy didn't just speak of the origin. It spoke of the one who would stand beside her. The first king to her first queen. The protector who would help her bridge two worlds. You can't know that you're that person. We barely know each other. I know enough. I know you chose mercy when you could have chosen vengeance. I know you see this power as responsibility, not privilege. I know that when Hazel offered you partnership in tyranny, you rejected it without hesitation. He lifted her hand to his lips, and the gesture was so courtly, so genuine, it made her chest ache. Transform me. Make me your first. Let me help you build something worth protecting. The origin blood within her responded to his words, singing with approval, recognizing in him something she was only beginning to see. Not just a king, not just a protector, but a partner, an equal. Someone who saw her not as the nobody she'd been, but as the someone she'd become. It will hurt. The transformation isn't gentle. I've survived worse. She pressed her palm to his chest, right over his heart. The origin blood flowed from her into him, and this time she understood the process better. She wasn't just transforming him. She was binding them together, creating a connection that transcended blood and bone. His back arched, his jaw clenched, but he never looked away from her eyes. She felt every second of his transformation, felt his heartbeat slow and strengthen, felt his mortality burn away like morning mist. When it was done, he was still Austin, still himself, but elevated, enhanced. His eyes glowed with the same silver fire as hers, and when he smiled, his fangs were elegant and deadly. I can hear everything, feel everything, and I'm connected to you. I can sense your presence like a star I'll always know how to navigate by. That's the origin bond. You're not just a vampire I created. You're my first, my partner in whatever comes next. He pulled her to her feet and into his arms, and the kiss that followed was inevitable, perfect, and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard despite no longer needing air. He rested his forehead against hers. Then let's build this kingdom together. Let's show both realms what vampires can be when they're born from choice instead of conquest. Over the following weeks, they did exactly that. Autumn transformed those who volunteered, soldiers who wanted to protect the realm, scholars who wanted to understand the new reality, healers who wanted to use vampire regeneration to help others. Every person she changed became connected to her through the origin bond, and she learned to feel them, guide them, keep them from losing themselves to bloodlust or power. Oliver became her general, organizing the new vampires into a force that could defend against Hazel's continued attacks. Austin ruled beside her, his strategic mind and political experience balancing her raw power. Together, they began to build something unprecedented, a kingdom where vampires and humans coexisted, where transformation was a gift offered, not a curse inflicted. But the balance couldn't last. The connection between realms was growing stronger, and 3 months after Autumn's transformation, the barrier between worlds finally shattered. She was in the throne room. They'd converted Austin's palace into something new, something that honored both human history and vampire potential, when reality rippled like water. A doorway opened in the air itself, silver light pouring through, and from it stepped Austin Nightshade, the vampire king from her original world. He was exactly as she remembered, cold elegance wrapped in deadly grace. But seeing him now, after becoming what she was, she realized he looked haunted. Behind him came others from the Nightfall Court, including the vampire Lady Hazel who'd made Autumn's life hell. But they didn't attack. They simply stared. So it's true. The servant girl I never noticed became the origin in another realm. The vampire king's voice carried none of the warmth she'd grown accustomed to from her Austin. This was power speaking, ancient and absolute. Interesting. And you've built this in only 3 months? Impressive. Austin, her Austin, stepped forward, placing himself between her and his vampire counterpart. She's under my protection, under this realm's protection. The vampire king studied his human-turned-vampire alternate self with something like amusement. I see. You've claimed the origin as your mate. Bold. Also prophesied, if you know where to look. Why are you here? What do you want? Balance. The realms were never meant to stay separate forever. Your transformation activated the origin blood in both worlds simultaneously. In my realm, the vessel remains intact, but its power is depleted. Everything it contained went into you. That means the natural vampires of my world are weakening, while your new vampires are thriving. He gestured to the doorway behind him. I'm here to propose a solution. What kind of solution? Merge the realms. Not fully, they'd tear each other apart, but create bridges. Allow passage between them. Let your new vampires learn from the old ones. Let the old ones draw strength from the origin again. He looked at her directly, and something in his expression softened. In my world, you were invisible, beneath notice. That was my failure. Here, you've become what you were always meant to be. Don't let our realms destroy each other out of pride or fear. The vampire Hazel stepped forward, and Autumn tensed. But this version looked different from both the human Hazel who'd attacked the castle and the vampire who'd tormented her. This Hazel looked chastened, almost humble. I made your life miserable. I treated you as less than nothing because I could. Because our world runs on cruelty and hierarchy. She bowed, actually bowed. I was wrong. Seeing what you've built here, seeing how your vampires follow you out of loyalty instead of fear, it's making many of us question everything about the Nightfall Court. Austin Nightshade nodded. My world is broken. We've spent 3,000 years perfecting dominance and forgetting purpose. Your realm has the chance to do better. But we need each other. My vampires need connection to the origin to survive. Your vampires need knowledge of what they'll become over centuries. He looked at her, Austin. And I suspect the prophecy that brought you two together spans both realms. Autumn looked at her, Austin, feeling his thoughts through their bond. He was cautious, but intrigued. Through their connection, she felt his question before he asked it. What exactly are you proposing? A covenant. Both realms acknowledge Autumn as the origin. Natural vampires from my world can petition her for renewal of their connection to the source. New vampires from this world can learn from our experience. Humans in both realms have the choice, truly have the choice, to transform or remain as they are. He paused. And when threats arise that endanger either world, we defend them together. You're asking me to rule both realms? I'm asking you to be what you already are, the bridge between them, the first, the origin. He glanced at his counterpart. With your mate beside you, obviously. The prophecy is clear on that point. The chamber fell silent. Autumn felt the weight of every eye on her. Vampires from both worlds, humans from her adopted realm, and the two versions of the man she'd somehow fallen in love with in different ways. One was her partner, her equal, the one who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. The other represented the world she'd fled, but also the world that needed saving from its own cruelty. I have conditions. Name them. First, no more servants treated as I was treated. In both realms, humans who choose to remain human are afforded dignity and respect. Second, transformation is always a choice, freely given, never coerced. Third, anyone in the Nightfall Court who abused their power faces consequences. Not death, but genuine reformation. She looked at the vampire Hazel. That includes you. I expected nothing less. And fourth, the realms merge gradually. We don't rush this. We build trust between worlds before we tear down all the barriers. The vampire king considered this, then nodded slowly. Reasonable. I accept your conditions. He approached her, moving with that supernatural grace, and knelt, actually knelt. On behalf of the Nightfall Court, I acknowledge you as the origin, the first, the bridge between worlds and the source of what we are. Behind him, every vampire from his world knelt as well. Even vampire Hazel bowed her head in genuine submission. The gesture rippled through the throne room, and Autumn felt the moment her rule became real in a way it hadn't been before. She wasn't just the origin of one realm. She was the origin of all vampires across all realities where they existed. Austin took her hand, and she felt his pride through their bond. You're going to be magnificent at this. I don't feel magnificent. I feel like the servant girl who stumbled into something too big for her. Then it's good you have all of us to help carry the weight. The months that followed transformed both realms. Autumn established the Court of Origin in the space between worlds, a palace that existed in both realities simultaneously, where vampires from either realm could gather. She appointed Oliver as her general, commanding armies from both worlds. Her Austin remained her primary advisor and partner, ruling the human realm while she handled vampire affairs. But the Vampire King, she learned his full name was Austin Nightshade Corvus, became an unexpected ally. He'd ruled through fear for so long that he'd forgotten other ways existed. Watching her build through loyalty and respect awakened something in him. He began reforming the Nightfall Court, dismantling the cruelest traditions, elevating those who'd been beneath notice. Human Hazel, the warrior who'd attacked the castle, eventually came to respect Autumn's rule. Vampire Hazel underwent genuine transformation of spirit, not just body, and became one of Autumn's most devoted followers, as if trying to atone for centuries of casual cruelty. The two realms didn't merge completely, but the barriers between them became permeable. Humans could choose which world to live in. Vampires could draw strength from the origin, regardless of realm. And slowly, painfully, both societies began to learn from each other. On the anniversary of Autumn's transformation, Austin took her to the Origin Chamber, the space that existed in both realms at once. Silver light filled the room, and she realized he decorated it with flowers that grew in both worlds, symbols of unity. I know we're already bonded. I know you can feel everything I feel, know everything I think. But some traditions are worth keeping. He knelt before her, pulling out a ring that glowed with the same silver light as the Origin blood. Autumn, first of her name, origin of all vampires, bridge between worlds. Will you marry me? Not because prophecy demands it, not because our bond requires it, but because I choose you every day, in every moment, across every reality where we exist? Yes, absolutely yes. The wedding took place in the Court of Origin, with guests from both realms and both species. The Vampire King attended, looking less haunted than he had in months, and offered a toast that made even the cynical vampires from the Nightfall Court murmur approval. To the Origin, who taught us that power means nothing without purpose. And to her king, who proves that strength comes in many forms. May your rule last millennia, and may the realms you've united never forget what you've built. 2 years after the wedding, Autumn gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, both carrying the Origin blood in their veins. They were the first children born to an Origin, and their existence sent ripples through both realms. They would grow up in a world where vampires and humans coexisted, where transformation was a choice, where power served purpose. She named them Dawn and Dusk, symbols of the balance she'd worked so hard to create. Austin held his daughter while Autumn cradled their son, and through their bond she felt his overwhelming joy and pride. They're perfect. They're going to change everything. They already have. Look. Through the window of their chamber she could see both realms overlapping, not in conflict but in harmony. The Nightfall Court's dark spires interweaving with the bright towers of the human kingdom, creating something entirely new. Vampires and humans walked the same streets, worked the same jobs, built the same future. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still those who resented the changes, still work to be done. But it was better, so much better than either world had been alone. Oliver knocked on the door and entered, bowing respectfully. My Origin, my king, the council is gathered. They're ready to hear your plans for the Western Territories. Tell them we'll be there in an hour. Some moments are more important than politics. He smiled and withdrew. Through the Origin bond, Autumn could feel every vampire she'd created, every soul connected to her across both realms. Thousands now, all of them drawing strength from her, all of them part of something larger than themselves. She'd been nobody, a servant girl too thirsty to question a glowing liquid in a forgotten chamber. And now she was the origin, the first, the bridge between worlds and the mother of a new age. Austin kissed her temple, his contentment flowing through their bond. What are you thinking about? About how far we've come. About how much further we have to go. About how I wouldn't change a single moment, even the terrible ones, because they led me here. She looked at her children, at her husband, at the merged realms visible through the window. We're building something that will last, Austin. Something worth every sacrifice. We already have. And in the space between worlds, in the chamber where it all began, the origin vessel remained empty, but not powerless. Its purpose had been fulfilled, its blood claimed, its prophecy realized. The first had risen, not from nobility or destiny alone, but from a simple act of thirst that changed everything. Autumn ruled both realms with Austin beside her, raised her children to understand the weight and privilege of power, and never forgot the servant girl who'd stumbled into greatness. She kept the old cleaning uniform in her chambers as a reminder of where she'd started. And sometimes when the weight of rule grew heavy, she'd touch it and remember. She'd been invisible once, beneath notice. Nobody. Now she was the origin, and she would spend eternity making sure no one else ever had to feel as small as she once had. The two realms thrived under her rule, and when new threats arose, as they always did, she faced them with Austin at her side, Oliver commanding her armies, and the loyalty of thousands of vampires she'd created or renewed. She drunk from the origin vessel by accident, transformed by necessity, and ruled by choice. And in the end, that made all the difference. Did you like this story? Do you want a part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, big shout out to our viewers from Fort Wayne, Indiana, USA, Canada, Michigan, London, Queensland, Birmingham, UK, Long Island, New York, Albany, Central Florida, California, Missouri. Thank you for being part of my small, humble community. To our growing viewers, comment below which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching.